Now, usually every week at this time we have our Friday forum, but this week we have just one guest in, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Is it with some relief you stumble towards the recess?
It's always a difficult time of year trying to get everything done, particularly getting lots of legislation through before the Dáil goes on recess, and we've got a lot done the last couple of weeks, but definitely haven't gone on holidays. The Senate still meets next week, and there'll be 2 more cabinet meetings, so I'll take and obviously there'll be a new Prime Minister over in the UK, so I'll take a bit of a break in August, but we'll still be
work until August.
At the desk
so
around the country for the next few
you
weeks.
will oversee the coronation of Boris Johnson, perhaps.
I hope to meet him quite soon. So, obviously, assuming he wins, of course, Jeremy Hunt is the other candidate. But whoever the new Prime Minister is, I think they're going to. I'm told they're going to come into office on the 24th of July. I expect they'll want to appoint their new cabinet, but I'd be very keen to speak to the new Prime Minister as soon as possible. So I won't be heading off until I've done that anyway.
Now, we have had, I suppose, some alarm expressed during the week about what might happen in the event of a hard Brexit. It's like a reality check that the Taoiseach and yourself wanted to inflict is not the right word, but to expose us to a reality check, because the boy who cried wolf, a bit of complacency had set in after the deadline for March 29th had passed.
Yeah, I suppose we don't want to frighten people, but we do want people, particularly businesses trading with the UK, and that includes Northern Ireland, to be aware of the very real and growing possibility of a crash out on October 31st. We're concerned that there may be a sense out there among some people that it's going to be all right on the night and a deal will be done, and maybe it will. And then some people are taking the view that because there were previous extensions, well, sure, won't there be another one? And that's not the right approach to take. The right approach to take is the precautionary approach. It's the approach that's been taken by government. It's why we've hired 700 revenue, HSE and agriculture officials. It's why we've put in the infrastructure in the ports and airports. And it's why we really need businesses and organisations that deal with the UK to make sure that they're ready to.
If they somehow scrambled a withdrawal agreement with backstop and all before the 31st of October, it would mean we'd have a transition period of 2 years. Or more, because they'd probably ask for extensions on that as well, inevitably almost, and they would be granted because that wouldn't be an issue. But it would mean we've an awful lot of people and an awful lot of facility ready to go when it would be premature.
Yeah, that's true, and I imagine at that point some of our critics will be criticising us for wasting so much money preparing for Brexit, but you have to prepare for these things. A hard Brexit without a deal will be a major change in our trading relationship with our nearest neighbour, and we have to be ready for that possibility. And at least when it comes to the staff, a lot of them are on other duties at the moment, and they can be repurposed for doing other things, like, for example, trying to find contraband and cigarettes and things like that. And the infrastructure, even though it might not be needed on the 1st of November,
it will ultimately
it may be, depending on what sort of free trade deal we're able to negotiate with you.
And we don't know ultimately whether a general election might precipitate another vote, and there might be perhaps a majority for Remain. We can only speculate that could be the case, but that's in the unknown.
That's right. And if you look at the opinion polls, and they are only opinion polls, but if you look at the opinion polls for the last year or so now in the UK, there's a consistent lead for people who want to remain. And it just doesn't seem that the British political system is able to offer people that choice. So, although it is significant, I think that the Labour Party has finally come behind a second referendum and would advocate a Remain vote in that scenario.
Now, during the week, the Taoiseach was quoted and then refused to comment on it because it was at a private meeting about Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson having a disingenuous debate about the border and Brexit. I mean, to me as an observer, that's certainly true. To you as Taoiseach, can you say that?
No. I wasn't at that meeting. And
no, but I mean the observation that it was a disingenuous debate. In other words, these magic solutions that they both appeared to offer, which we've explored on this side of the water and found them wanting.
I suppose I'd put it a different way. Politicians, when they're in campaign mode, and both of those men are in campaign mode, tend to campaign in poetry, in simple terms and high level messages. When you get into office, you govern in prose. And I imagine whoever is the new Prime Minister is going to face a very serious reality check when they sit down with their officials and civil servants to be fully briefed on the realities of Brexit if they don't know them already.
Were you reassured by the words of the Commission President designate? This is Miss van der Leyen, who was foursquare behind
Van der Leyen.
Van der Leyen.
Not van der Leyen.
On the line, that she was foursquare behind the agreement that has been negotiated.
Yes, very reassured by what she had to say. I'm going to speak to her by phone actually this afternoon, and I'm working hard to encourage the Irish MEPs to support her candidature because she hasn't been approved by the Parliament yet, and I really hope that we can get as many of our 11 MEPs to support her. She is going to get through, I believe, and she is part of my own political family, which is Fine Gael and DPP, but even at the same time, I think it would be good for the maximum number possible of Irish MEPs to support her, because I think that sends a message that we appreciate her support for us.
Now, the question of the withdrawal agreement, you have said again and again that it will not be cracked open, that this is it. This is the deal that was negotiated by the British government with the EU, and that's the deal.
Yeah, and we shouldn't forget that this was a deal negotiated by the British government. Large elements, including the backstop, were co-designed by them. Notwithstanding what they may be saying now, both Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson voted for it on the third vote. Jeremy Hunt, I think, voted for it on all three votes. So, we're always open to clarifications. We're always open to political statements that help to clarify or give reassurance. But the fundamentals of the withdrawal agreement, including the backstop, have to be there in letter and in spirit. Now,
Boris Johnson's position seems to be, if we crash out, well, your backstop's no good to you anyway. So, you're going to have a hard Brexit, you're going to have the border, although there won't be any visible border, according to Boris. So he's saying that, when you're asked to choose between a pig and a poke, one is as bad as the other, so you might as well give us concessions.
Well, I think what he's saying, which is incorrect, is that we can sort out the issues relating to trade and the Irish border during the implementation phase, as they call it, transition phase as we call it.
But there won't be one if there's a hard Brexit.
Exactly, and that is the kind of reality check that I think the new Prime Minister is going to hear all about from their officials and advisors on the 26th or 27th of July, because what this will mean for the UK is an inability to trade. Their car factories won't operate. They won't be able to get their parts in time. It will be incredibly severe on Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland businesses will face tariffs, including those trading with Ireland, with the Republic of Ireland, and will face huge difficulties getting to market too, because a huge amount of Northern Ireland trade with England goes through Dublin port.
So capacity may even be an issue at the ports in Northern Ireland.
Well, particularly at Dover and Calais.
Yeah.
And that'll be a problem for us as well, but at least we can go around.
No, but if
worst case scenario,
we coming from Northern Ireland that will no longer come through Dublin port, it'll have to go through Larne, one presumes. And I mean, what kind of capacity have they got there?
It would have to go through Larne if they have the capacity to drive the entire length of Britain from Scotland all the way down to join a pretty bad hold up in Dover Calais.
So it is
and then pay tariffs.
Terrifying.
So the impact on Northern Ireland, I think, would be more severe than any other part of Europe, and the impact on Britain and Ireland will also be severe. So I'd hope any British Prime Minister wouldn't willingly do that.
The game seems to be get the job and then we'll kind of muddle through.
Well, I'm going to have to hear from the new Prime Minister, and the first thing you do when somebody gets a job is give them a fair hearing. I know, talking to the other Prime Ministers and Presidents in European countries, that's what we'll do.
The request for an extension, for example, would they give it, or are they just sick to the teeth of Britain's dilly-dallying on the whole Brexit process?
But there's huge frustration that we're still talking about Brexit 2 and 3 years since the referendum. For us, obviously, it's a major existential issue, but I can totally understand that for countries in the Mediterranean, for example, they have other concerns. Countries on the eastern border with Russia have other concerns, and they're getting a bit frustrated that Brexit is taking up so much of our agenda when we have other things to do, whether it's migration or climate action, security, lots of different things on the European agenda, deepening the single market and the Eurozone. So the kind of sense that I'd have from my colleagues around the table is that a further extension would only be contemplated for a realistic purpose. So say, for example, an election happened in the UK. Say, for example, there was a decision made by them, not by us, to have a second referendum. But what wouldn't be contemplated is a further extension for another round of negotiations, because negotiations are closed, or a set of indicative votes because they've already had them.
There is an understanding in some quarters in the British government how catastrophic this might be. We know Philip Hammond has the view that Brexit, hard Brexit, would be disastrous. But in an interview this morning broadcast on Sky News, the business secretary, Greg Clark, now he is a confirmed Remainer and always has been, he told Sky News he was certain that many, many thousands of jobs will be lost if a no-deal Brexit goes through. How can it be that there is such different visions in a government?
Well, it can, unfortunately. The vision behind Brexit is essentially a nationalistic one. And perhaps as a country, we should, while we don't agree with it, maybe we should understand it a little bit better. And I was thinking about this the other day, and if we went back 100 years ago when we sought independence, when we decided to become an independent country and leave the British Empire, the wealthiest and most successful trading bloc in the world at the time, the economic case for Irish independence was pretty weak, quite frankly, wasn't it? But we took the view at the time that we wanted to be independent, we wanted our own industries, and if that meant us being poorer, well then so be it. So even though I don't agree with that philosophy, I think we should at least understand our own history and therefore maybe understand why those kind of nationalistic tendencies may exist in other countries. But we didn't
make significant progress until the 60s, which is 40 years after.
No, and that I think will be a consequence of Brexit for Britain, is that it will fall into relative economic decline for many decades, probably be overtaken by France again, and slowly over time it'll be overtaken by lots of countries in Asia. And I think one of the difficulties for Britain is their struggling to cope with the fact that as a country and economy they're not as important in the world as they used to be. You know, there are 100 million people living in Vietnam. There, more people in they're going to be overtaken by Korea, India economically. It's inevitable, and that's why most European countries understand why we need to get together, stick together, and integrate so that we can preserve our way of life, our prosperity, our peace and security. Britain has never really fully accepted that in the way that France and Germany and Italy did after the war.
We can look at the Irish struggle for independence. We could look at India and Pakistan. But maybe Brexit is finally the sun setting on the British Empire.
Perhaps, but that's their choice, and it's their decision, and we have to respect the decisions that they make. But what we have to do is look out for ourselves.
Yeah, and I'll talk about the border in a moment. But it does seem the miscalculation when they look at trade with the EU, and it's two-way, and what they import and what they export and so on. But they don't seem to realise that for individual countries, Ireland is the exception because of the predominance of our trade. A huge quantity of it goes to Britain. But for most of the accumulation of trade into Britain, which would be lost, is made up of a whole pile of 27 different components. So the loss for each of those is not at all as significant as the gross loss for the island of Britain. And
that's right. And one of the Brexit fantasies was that the German car manufacturers would be banging on Angela Merkel's door, pleading for leniency and a good trade deal for the UK, and that hasn't happened. There's plenty of other places they can sell their cars, and they may even pull the manufacturing out of the UK and move it to Eastern Europe. Even for us as well, we're much less dependent on the UK market than we used to be. About 17% of our trade by volume is with the UK. But there are certain sectors that are particularly exposed, and that is, the agri-food sector, and then also the, some of the SME manufacturers.
Now, we've been talking about things like Bailey's Irish Cream and other commodities where the milk goes back and forward. And if you imagine a tariff this way, then a tariff coming back as added value is put to the milk, and then a tariff going back forward. It's unconscionable that this should be the case, but it may unfold with a hard Brexit. And then the question of defending the single market, Ireland being asked to make sure there's an effective closure of the back door into the EU, which we are.
Well, we should never forget, though, that this is our single market and it's our customs union, and we're part of a single market of more than 400 million people, and our economy, our jobs and our prosperity depends on it. So it's not a case of being, asked to implement some sort of awkward European law. This is something that we want to do and we need to do, because we have to protect as much as we can our jobs, our businesses, our livelihoods and our prosperity. So, we're going to want to protect the single market and make sure that Ireland doesn't become a backdoor to the single market for the UK. Just imagine, for example, if we don't do that, what would happen the first time that a BSE cow, we'll say from Britain, ends up in France? What would happen if chlorinated chicken from America ended up in a French supermarket through the back door of Ireland? That would create huge difficulties for us, and that's why we need to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen.
How do we police that? Because it seems impossible. We've ruled out the idea that, say, at Blackline and Belcoo, that bridge going across, where you can nearly spit across from...
Yeah, I've been there many times.
Yeah, so
fabulous restaurant there, as well.
Yes, indeed. And Nevin's restaurant in Blackline. But the question is, if it's not there, where is the check? They're the kind of things that we're trying to work out with the European Commission at the moment, and we don't have a perfect solution. We all know that the best solution for Ireland would be for the UK to remain in the EU, but they've decided that's not possible. The second best solution would be for them to stay in the single market and the customs union, which effectively is a transition period. But they say they're not willing to do that, maybe for a few years, but not indefinitely. And the other best solution is a backstop, either a UK-wide backstop or a Northern Ireland backstop. We don't mind which one it is, and they haven't been able to get a majority for that for the moment. So any solution is going to be inferior to those three solutions. But the kind of things we're looking at and we're proposing, for example, is that the entire island of Ireland will be treated as the same when it comes to agriculture and food. That would be a single epidemiological zone, and any SBS checks, as they call them, would happen on the ports in. So products and animals coming in from Britain to the island of Ireland. That doesn't solve your tariff problem.
No, it doesn't solve the tariff problem. The tariffs will apply. In an odious scenario, unfortunately.
I was mulling over the idea of a rolling backstop, where you have, say, a 7-year backstop, and I know that you have said, and Simon Coveney has said, a time-limited backstop is not a backstop at all. But the idea that as certain targets are reached, that the backstop shortens and shortens, and eventually, when a total trade deal is done that everyone's happy with, the backstop goes.
But that is the plan. The backstop is only supposed to be temporary. It isn't supposed to last forever, and it is supposed to be superseded by a free trade agreement.
But you know what I mean? Say you had a 20-year backstop, and you say, okay, if you do a deal on aviation, it'll be 18 years. Now you do the deal on agriculture, it's 15 years. Now you do the deal on whatever, and gradually it gets shortened. And then when finally we have this deal, which everyone wants to do, it's gone.
I suppose, how do we know for sure that everybody wants to do that deal? Because there is uncertainty in the UK. Even among Brexiteers, they're divided among themselves as to what they want the final status relationship to look like. There are people in the Brexit camp who want a very different approach. They want to be able to for example, restore what they believe is an Atlantic alliance with America, and have free trade with America. So you could have hormone beef, chlorinated chicken, Gouda that's not from Gouda, champagne that's not from France, all coming from America into the British market, maybe even vehicles that are at lower emission standards than we would allow in the European Union. And if they did that kind of trade deal with America, they certainly could never do the kind of trade deal with Europe that would avoid a hard border, and that's why we need the backstop, because we can't assume in 5 years' time or 10 years' time that there won't be a radical hard Brexit government in London that decides to turn its back on the European Union entirely.
Before
it is an insurance policy in that sense.
Conversation about Brexit, the question of how we will police that single market, Mobile patrols was one thing that Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson both kind of embraced. I mean, how is it to be done? Long border, lots of crossings. Those unapproved roads, they used to have blockades on them. That won't be really acceptable to people anymore.
No. What won't be acceptable to us is physical infrastructure on the border. Like the kind of things that we're exploring with the European Commission, we are only exploring them at this stage, is this idea that I mentioned of the island of Ireland being treated as a single unit for agriculture and food with the checks.
Yeah, but that's only the epidemiological and health checks. But the tariff thing and the milk going back and forward.
And also, Britain would have to... the milk going back and forward would be okay in that scenario, but that would mean the UK accepting that Northern Ireland is being treated differently when it comes to...
Which the DUP say they will not accept.
Say they won't, although Ulster farmers may have a different view on that. Indeed, I believe they do. The other things, obviously, are checks at business level. And then also, random checks and controls, and we'll have to have them anyway because of smuggling. In fact, they exist already, but we would have to have a lot more of them. But this isn't a good solution. No. This is vastly inferior to what we negotiated with Prime Minister May. It's vastly inferior to the Norway Plus model, and that is, I would hate anyone to get the impression that there are some alternative arrangements that are actually a good outcome for Northern Ireland or Ireland. There isn't.
Well, I suspect you'll have a lot more work to do before you get your holiday in August. We'll pause because lots of other things on our agenda. Some of the comments: I think our leaders need to be friends to the UK now, and backstop red lines need to be lightened a bit. If Boris gets in, we could drive the UK to crash out. We need to be flexible, and there's lots more. Ireland didn't willingly join the British Empire. Britain willingly joined the EU, so it's not apples for apples. We want to talk about broadband. I mean, everything was going along, an expensive process. People were shocked at the ultimate bill, but at the same time, the process was the process. There was the last man standing in David McCourt, and he became the preferred bidder. And then Caroline Lennon of AIR goes into the committee and says, we can do it at a cut price.
Yeah, well, first of all, when it comes to this project, the National Broadband Plan, we should never lose sight of the objective, and that is to connect 500,000 homes, farms and businesses across rural Ireland with 1 million people living in those homes and working in those farms and businesses to high-speed broadband, giving them a bit of an advantage in some ways over other parts of the country, but at the very least getting high-speed broadband at the same speeds for the same price as people do in Dublin and Cork, as they should. And that's something I really believe in. I think it can make a real difference in terms of improving the quality of life in rural Ireland, making sure that people have access to public services. I often talk about Ireland in 20 or 30 years when you literally would have a post office in every home, because all those services are available online. A lot of healthcare is going to be done remotely and digitally, and we need to make sure that people in rural Ireland have access to all of that. And then there's smart farming, and there's so many other things as well. Home working, for example. A quarter of people working for Apple now work from home. People in rural Ireland can't do that in many cases because they don't have the secure connections.
Are you on the horns of a dilemma now? Because what Caroline Lennon said was that we can do this for 1 million. Okay, we have to change some of the rules about the connection fee and so on. All we want you to do is, instead of charging 100 for the connection, charge 170, which is what we're charging now anyway, in the areas which are deemed to be commercial. This really presents you with a political difficulty.
I thought that actually a couple of weeks ago, and spent a bit of time with Minister Bruton looking at what Eircom are saying, or AIR rather, are saying. And what they're saying is that they're not making an offer, actually. This is a theoretical thing they're putting forward. It's not an offer as such. And they don't say it's an offer, it's a theoretical alternative. And they're saying if you went for this alternative, we could do it cheaper. I think that's correct, by the way. The mid-range they use in their documents now is 1.5 billion. That doesn't include VAT or contingency, so it would be closer to 2, but it would still be cheaper. 500 million, a billion. Than the MBB programme, not small money, but certainly not the kind of saving that we might have thought about in the first place when they first put it forward. But there's real downsides to it, and they really give that away in one of the letters they wrote to us. It's very honest, and they said the reason why they pulled out of the National Broadband Plan was because they'd be required to provide a cheaper, better, faster service in rural Ireland than they currently provide for their own customers in the rest of Ireland. And as a result of that, they'd be forced to bring their standards up. So the real reason why the Air proposal is cheaper for the taxpayer is because people in rural Ireland would have higher connection charges, they'd have higher user charges, there would be a lower quality of service than we're expecting from MBP in terms of fixing repairs and so on. There would be no guaranteed timelines on the rollout, and also Air wouldn't commit to put in any equity at all. So it's, if you've two cars in front of you, there's a reason why one car might be 30% cheaper. It's because it's not as good a car. It's an inferior product they're offering. One of the issues is that Air would still be contracted in some way to provide their poles and ducts where they exist, and in the event of a breakdown, David McCord would be picking up the phone and saying, by the way, in the Highlands of Donegal we have a breakdown, it's your pole, go up there and fix it, say to Air. And maybe that's not an outcome they want. I can't speak for them on that.
So are you going ahead then?
There's one thing I'm absolutely certain about. Having looked at what Air has said, there is a reason why what they're proposing is cheaper. It's because it's inferior. It puts more costs on rural people in terms of connections and user charges. It would be a lower quality of service. There'd be no guarantee on rollout, no guarantee on equity. And also, we couldn't just give it to them. We'd have to do a whole new procurement process all over again. So if we sign the contract, we can start the work this year, in fact.
So it sounds like you've decided.
If we go with the Air model, we'd have to go out and retender. The department says that would take about 3 years, and then Air mightn't even get the contract at the end of it all. So it's not a great offer when you see it.
There's also the threat of legal action from other parties who were in the bidding process.
And there's that too, yeah. And a number of industry partners came out just in last week to say that they would challenge this legally if we now. It does
sound though like you have made up your mind to go with David McCord. All things being equal, the contracts being agreed, the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
Well, the decision was made by government to appoint National Broadband Ireland as the preferred bidder. That decision stands. Where we're now at is at the final contract stage. So the contract's not yet signed. But when we decided to go with this, knowing that it was going to cost a lot more than we thought it would, we decided to go with this because nobody could put forward an alternative that was better. And we still haven't seen anyone put forward an alternative.
Okay, so Air queered the pitch, but only for a few weeks. Is that it? Their intervention, interesting, but that's it. It's not a player.
But their intervention essentially says that the alternative that they're suggesting would require another probably 3-year delay. Even then, it might never happen at all because there'd be no guarantee that they'd get the contract. And if they did, the service they would provide would be inferior for rural Ireland. So it doesn't sound great. If you really care about rural Ireland, if you want rural Ireland to have a future, why would you not want to sign this contract?
I'm to infer, therefore, that it will go ahead unless there's some
problem with
difficulty.
The contract.
All right.
And there's many a slip between cup and lip, as you know.
It brings us, though, to the accusation that's been levelled against your government about profligacy with money. The broadband costing more than perhaps it should, although we've tease that out, but also the National Children's Hospital, and you know where I stand on the National Children's Hospital. I think it's in the wrong place, costing far too much. The reputation that your party has had for fiscal prudence seems to have been thrown out the window.
I don't think it's thrown out the window. I think it's incurred a bit of a hit because of the overruns in the National Children's Hospital, and their overruns in other construction projects too. Construction inflation is running at 8% a year, so things cost more to build now than would have been thought 3 or 4 years ago, and that's not our doing. It's just the nature of construction inflation. But I think if you're being fair to the government, and I know some people will want to be fair to the government, you'd look at things in the round. And we manage a budget every year of 60,000 million euros. It's an enormous budget, and last year, for the first time in over 10 years, it's in surplus. We raised more in revenue than we spent in terms of public service and infrastructure. First time in a long time we've had a budget surplus, and all things going to plan with Brexit, this year coming or next year, we'll run a bigger surplus too. We're paying down the national debt. The last Fianna Fáil government quadrupled the national debt, and in terms of GDP, we've reduced it by about half. So if you look at things in the round, rather than maybe one particular programme or one particular project, we're managing this economy very well.
But that's the problem when you look at the individual projects. I mean, the Children's Hospital is scandalous. I mean, it really is, because even you, after the initial estimates were proven to be false, I think you put a figure of around 800 million, and short of an asteroid hitting Ireland, that's what it was going to be, including inflation, construction inflation, and all the rest. It'll be more than double that.
Well, I was wrong about that. They were the figures I was given at the time, and those running the project honestly believed that they were the correct figures, but they turned out not to be. This project has turned out to be a lot more expensive and a lot more complicated than people thought, and it is going to cost more, but it is being built. We've been talking about building a National Children's Hospital since I was a medical student. The satellite centre of Blanchardstown is already built. I drove past the main site in Dublin 8 the other day. First story is already up. Tala is well under construction.
A concern raised yesterday.
This is going to transform paediatric healthcare in Ireland, and a little bit like the Port Tunnel, a little bit like Terminal 2 in Dublin Airport, a little bit like the Jack Lynch Tunnel. It'll probably be a bad news story until it's open, and the day it's open, nobody will be sorry we built it.
There was a concern raised yesterday about the satellite centre in Blanchardstown that it might, according to Louise O'Reilly of Sinn Féin, it may only be 9 to 5 now and not kind of 8 to midnight, which was envisaged originally.
The plan was that it would be, I think, 8 to 8, 7 days a week, but it won't open like that on day one.
Is it still intended to have that 12-hour service?
Yeah, but that won't be possible from the start. Been very successful recruiting the nurses, not so successful recruiting the consultants. So I think initially it's going to open 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and then the hours will be extended. But that actually wouldn't be unusual for a new service. You tend to commission it in phases, not all in one go.
Just someone pointing out the new Children's Hospital in Edinburgh, 150 million for 244 beds. Ours, 2 billion for 470 beds. It was an ill-starred project from the beginning, and it wasn't minded. That was the problem. There was no one really in charge.
I think maybe there are too many people in charge. One of the things that was done...
That means nobody's in charge.
Well, one of the things that was done was establishing a dedicated agency, the National Paediatric Hospital Development Board, to drive the project forward. But you also had involvement from the HSE, Department of Health, Department of Public Expenditure.
And the politicians.
And the politicians too. But the most important thing for me now is there's no going back on this. Whatever about arguments around the site and so on, and that decision was made back in 2012. There is no going back on this now. So what we need to make sure, first of all, is that actually it gets built and it gets opened and commissioned in 2023.
One of the things
and kids have the quality of paediatric healthcare that they should have.
One thing that scandalised people was the idea that you'd have private healthcare in the Children's Hospital. This is our brand new public Children's Hospital. Every child should be treated the same, irrespective of whether their parents can afford insurance.
Well, first of all, every child in the new Children's Hospital will have a private room. Whether their parents have insurance or not, every single room is going to be a private room with room for a parent to stay. So different to what we have now.
So is there any point in having private insurance, a block for the consultants?
The only private element of it is that there'll be 8 clinic suites. And one of those clinic suites will be used by consultants for private clinics. They will have to pay for it. And that will bring extra money into the hospital, which will then cross-subsidise the public service. And again, this already exists in Crumlin Children's Hospital. And even if you go to the NHS, if you go over to Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, where my sister's a consultant, they have a private clinic there too. And the private clinic brings extra money into the hospital. So at least until we have this system in Ireland, at least until we get rid of that system, this is the model we have, and consultants' contracts allow them to do that. And we don't want to lose all our consultants by telling them that they can no longer do private practice.
The final area is Mercosur and the vote in the Dáil yesterday, which the government lost. It doesn't have any effect in terms of tying your hands, but it's a bad deal for beef. The beef farmers have been protesting. The Brazilians even say that the 99,000 tonnes of beef is a good start. They intend to get more.
Well, they won't. And Commissioner Hogan and I have worked very hard to minimise the impact on beef. And bear in mind there could be upsides for this too, particularly for dairy, drinks industry, SMEs. It's a market of 250 million people. And it's a big market, and there are opportunities for Ireland as well, as IBEC and the business organisations have pointed out.
What do you say to the beef
industry? I say this, first of all, that we totally understand the pressure that the beef industry and beef farmers are under. Very low prices at the moment, the fear of Brexit, Mercosur potentially coming going down the line in 5 or 6 years' time, and we're going to do everything we possibly can to defend their interests, to make sure that there's a level playing field, that the South American countries have to live up to their climate change obligations, that we have to have the same food safety standards and traceability standards, and that we need to make sure that we're able to compensate farmers by opening up other markets for them to compensate for anything lost due to Mercosur. But there's one thing I think I really need to say about this, and I think this is important and maybe hasn't been part of the public debate so far. We export 90% of our food. We're a major food exporter as a country, and that's only possible because of free trade. So Ireland has to be very careful not to become a country that's suddenly against free trade and blocking free trade deals. So over the next 2 years, you're going to see Mercosur turned into a proper legal agreement. It's only a 17-page document at the moment. So about 2 years will be spent building up a, legal agreement that we will then be able to vote for or against in 2 years' time. During that same period, probably during the transition period of Brexit, I'm going to be trying to negotiate a free trade deal with the UK that continues to give our farmers and our agri-food sector tariff-free access to the most important market for Irish food, which is the UK. We could find ourselves in a very strange position as a country, that if we're arguing for a free trade agreement with the UK, but then trying to block a free trade agreement with South America. We need to be very careful that we're smart about this, that we don't win the battle on Mercosur and actually lose the war when it comes to the bigger picture, and that is keeping the UK market tariff-free, open to our farmers, and winning trade deals like one with China, which could be a huge opportunity for our beef industry given the demand for protein-based foods in that particular market.
And finally, confirmation that Commissioner Hogan will be in the next Commission.
Well, I hope so. He's been re-nominated by the government, but obviously has to be confirmed by the Parliament. That's the way it works. You'll know that Ursula von der Leyen has said that she's keen to have gender balance on her commission. But I think Ireland is already providing a lot of gender balance. We have an Irish woman who's the European Ombudsman. We have an Irish woman, Mary McGuinness, who is head of the first Vice President of the European Parliament. 5 of our 11 MEPs are women. So in gender balance, there has to be men and women. And I think that Phil Hogan being a reappointment, that his reappointment will be confirmed.
Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, thank you very much for joining us in studio today.